It's tough being a veteran. You sacrifice everything you have for the greater good. However, the degree to which soldiers suffer is a consistent taboo. Many return to civilian life with a pile of hospital bills, crippling PTSD, a biased family court system, and a world that would rather sweep them under the rug than deal with their problems. Sadly, many servicemen lack the support systems needed to help them through these rough patches, and often with tragic results. Join the Honey Badgers along with special guest Terrence Popp as we discuss the topic of veteran suicide. As always, the show will be available for download at www.honeybadgerbrigade.com.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio, radio with bite.
Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Tonight our special guest is Terrence Popp. Also joining us is Hannah Wallen, Karen Strawn, Crystal Garcia, and me, Rachel Edwards. Hey Terrence.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. Could you tell us a bit about what you do?
Well,
for those of us at home that don't know.
Okay, I run a nonprofit 501c called secondclasscitizen.org. It's being run by another individual, but I started it, and now I am a co-owner and help produce and run Redonkulous.com, which basically focuses on anything that's wrong or ridiculous, qualifies as redonkulous. And right now, for the past year, I've been attacking a lot of the subjects in regards to the male-female dynamic and what goes on in family court, since it's very close to my heart. And I believe I'm the only one on the planet who is conveying wisdom using humor and talking about these subjects as I do.
Not just humor, but math.
Yes, it's all fun and games until you whip out the numbers.
You break it down. What I love is, you're just like you just lay it all out there in mathematical formulas, and then you say, "Don't be mad at me, don't hate me, ladies. I'm just telling you the truth." It
is what it is.
It is what it is. So yeah, no, I really. Your channel is like, I subscribed early on, and I do not regret it. So,
well, I have another one coming out called System Surfers, where it's going to be a longer one, and we basically talk about the female entitlement and how much money they get for just sitting back and having kids.
Oh my goodness, that would, because I don't even know whether that. How much would it vary whether the entitlement is coming from a male partner or whether the entitlement is coming from the government?
I cover the entire thing. I cover the cash value of all the welfare benefits, the Section 8, the medical, the dental, and then I also cover the child support. I have it it's on a spreadsheet on redonkulous.com. You guys can go download it and look at the math yourself. It's quite devastating.
One of the really interesting things, because I read an article about 6-8 months ago on how they measure poverty, and one of the ways that they use census data to measure poverty, and one of the things is what things are qualified as income and what are not. And one of the really ridiculous things is that all of those things like Section 8 benefits and welfare and daycare subsidies and all of these other things, food stamps, all of that, doesn't count as income. So the more of those things that you give to people, the less they have to go out and work, and the more technically poor they are in all of the ways that we technically measure poverty. So, if you give somebody $1,200 a month in state benefits, and none of those are counted as income, and because they receive those things, they only have to make $800 a month to make ends meet now through paid work, rather than $2,000 prior to that, prior to those things being given to them, they're technically considered more poor than they were a year ago, right? So all of these measures that we bring in to reduce poverty, they actually increase poverty simply because of the way we measure poverty and the fact that we don't factor in any of those things. So, like, frankly, and a friend of mine, she was doing her GED, and one of her major essays, research project type things she did was to determine how much a single mother on welfare costs the Canadian taxpayer, or costs every Canadian individual, whether they're a year old or a month old or 65 years old. And she found, after doing a whole bunch of research and calling a bunch of places, she found that it was about $11,000 per year per person in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the numbers that I came up with during looking at it was, I think it was Idaho. The value was like right just shy of $12,000, and Hawaii somewhere in $62,000 range for the cash equivalent. Yeah, the cash equivalent of the benefits that they get. And they also can get child support. There is supposedly there's a loophole between the two, but if you have your Section 8 set up before you get child support, there's almost no guarantee that it'll be reported down the line that you're getting it. So it's like free money. And even if they get caught, they get like a slap on the wrist. They're not taken off the program because their children will starve. And, it just goes on and on. And,
well,
it's unbelievable.
It's really the thing. Like, just like if, say, your ex-wife falsely accuses you of domestic or sexual violence or something during the divorce proceedings, the very act of her accusing you of that gives her de facto custody for up to a year until everything's sorted out and the allegations are all processed and investigated and all of that, right? At which point they say, well, she's had custody of these children for a year, and so she now has custody because it would be cruel to the children to give them to a man they've been taught to fear and hate. And also, we can't penalize her by putting her in prison or charging her with a crime because that would punish the children. And we can't penalize her financially in the settlement because that would punish the children, right? And
correct.
Because she's attached herself to these children so permanently, she has now impunity.
Correct.
Well, speaking of that, that actually ties in with one of our stories. You guys remember Matthew Hines, and for those of you who don't know, he's still a U.S. Navy sailor, who was overseas in the Pacific Ocean during a custody hearing. He received custody of his, I think she was 2 years old when he originally got custody because his ex-wife had abused and neglected her. Now, she was trying to file for custody again, and they were going to, I think, rule in her favor because he was out at sea, and the judge was had not been informed that he was somewhere in the Pacific Ocean deployed. And it's kind of a big mess, but Michigan legislation, they're actually trying to pass a law that would actually protect servicemen and women who currently have custody of their children, and it would hold off any kind of proceedings until they returned. They can't legally mess with the status of their custody while they're away, while they're deployed.
Well, technically that already exists in the Federal Soldier-Sailor Relief Act, and it's not really followed because there's no punitive action mentioned within the law. I mean, it's a big fat so what. He's in the Army, you can't do it against the federal law, and because there's no punishment. There's nothing, nothing you can do.
That's pretty much like what women have in family court. There's really no punishment, so nobody does anything.
Steal and do whatever they got to do. I mean, one of my observations that I've come across in my travels is I've noticed that when you give somebody just a shred of power and take away their accountability, you always grow a monster. Not some of the time, not part of the time, but all the time.
Yeah.
And there is no checks and balances in family court, and you have a tyrannical system which is growing monsters at breakneck speed.
Yeah.
Well,
he filed. Go on.
No, go ahead, Rachel.
He filed all the paperwork he was supposed to. He even sent in a letter explaining to the judge where he was going to be, and none of that mattered because somebody didn't tell the judge that where he was.
I have already handled his situation. I believe
Really?
the judge has reversed herself.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
good.
well, and frankly, I think that it's kind of it's a little bit of a cop out to say the judge didn't know. The judge obviously knew. If he wrote her several times to let him know, she obviously knew. It wasn't until somebody was going to say, "Okay, we're going to make you look like a piece of shit in front of a public audience."
Actually,
that
she
the
has
judge,
been made to look like a piece of shit in front of the entire world.
Yeah,
that was
that's
in my opinion, of course.
Yeah, that's when she says, "Oh, well, okay, you're right." Terrence, have you any idea whether there was any kind of apology forthcoming from the judge?
No, not
Well,
as of yet.
Yeah, because an apology is an admission of wrongdoing.
I mean, all I really did was I wrote some letters to my congressman. I served with some people who now work at high levels. I sent them and forwarded them the link on Facebook, and I caused a little bit of an uproar. And because it's not just him. I mean, this happens every day. I don't know how many divorces happen in America a day or in Canada, but a good portion of these guys, are probably in the service because a lot of young people that don't know any better and they suffer from youth-itis. Make irrational decisions and tie themselves to a walking mistake. And divorces usually happen, and they get taken to the cleaners.
Yeah, they do. They really do. And frankly, it's. I look at it and I think, like one of the things that struck me about your particular case, Terrence, was this sort of the whole idea that you would be called an assassin and a murderer in front of the judge, and therefore you're not fit to raise your children.
Well, they pulled that card, and then they pulled the fact that I was wounded in Iraq by a roadside bomb, and I had actual hemorrhaging in my brain that you can see on an MRI.
Mm-hmm.
And they used that also as a basis to not grant me joint physical custody. I was basically called at 10:30 a.m. and by the custody investigator and said I needed to produce a report from a psychiatrist that I was even stable enough to handle having continuous contact with my children. And my response was, okay, I'll jump through whatever hoop of fire you request. When do I need to have it? And she's like, I need it by 2 o'clock today because that's when I make my ruling.
Oh.
I was like, okay.
That's insane.
I have zero time to react. There's no way I could get that. The only thing I could say was, because by the time that this took place, I was already returned to full duty, and I had no restrictions. So I told her that. I said, I've been returned to full duty, and I have no restrictions. I don't understand why I need to see a psychiatrist if I'm returned to full duty.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, it's too bad that this is what I want. And and she had already made her mind up from the very beginning. So the whole thing is a sham. There's no custody investigation. When the odds are 85-15 for the woman, there is no custody investigation. And of that 15% of the time that the man does win custody of his children, 5 to 7% of that is uncontested, meaning that the soon-to-be ex-wife doesn't even show up in court.
Yeah. And the rest, it's generally involving $200,000 or more in legal fees to get that.
A situation
I don't have that kind of walking around
so
money.
bad that they can't give her custody.
Well, what I found interesting was, I don't know if you're familiar, Terrence, with Daddy Justice, Ben oh God, I can never remember his name, Vanderheim or
Yeah,
Verhoeven.
I am familiar with him. I've seen some of his footage, and I'm actually I got a cell phone number. And I'm going to call him and see if I can get his stock footage, because I'm making a video making fun of radical feminism. And there's some women on there that say some pretty illogical things, and I'm going to make them famous.
I think that would be a good idea, but one of the things about his case was that his ex-wife was, according to him, the only woman in the United States who has ever been convicted of perjury for lying to a family court. Her and a social worker went to prison for lying to a family court, right, about sexual abuse allegations, blah, 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 right? She served her sentence, and when she got out, she was granted 50% custody just sort of by default.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, and when you make an allegation of sexual abuse against your children, you know, like of your children against your spouse, right, a false allegation, you are actually subjecting your children to a huge traumatic experience, a traumatic ordeal, where they're going to be physically examined in very invasive ways, and they're going to be psychologically examined in very invasive ways, and they're going to have all kinds of horrible things sort of inflicted on them that are I guess they're the lesser of two evils if it's actually happened, right? But if you know that it hasn't happened, right, and you're inflicting this on your children, right, that's child abuse. And she got out of prison, and they gave her 50-50 custody. Like, I was just blown away by that. It was just like, oh, of course. You know, she's learned her lesson, or she didn't really mean it, or whatever, and she's no danger to her kids, even though she's willing to use them as a bludgeon against their father.
Yeah,
like,
it's all fun and games until it's a dude that does it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually have a couple other questions. Well, I actually have been looking at a lot of the statistics, and it really was tough to hunt some of this stuff down. And some of these studies were a little bit... there was some room for error, especially when you're looking at veteran suicide, because there are, at least I think they mentioned at least something in the realm of 20% are not actually written down as veterans upon their death certificate. So, and I'm wondering, well, gee, how are you getting that number if you don't know how many of them there are that are being misreported?
I mean, from what I've read, they only really track these guys like up to a year after they leave the service, and then, you know, they just kind of blend into the population, and they might just fall in as just a regular Joe, you know, commit suicide. So I mean, it's tough. I mean, the numbers I've seen is somewhere between 18 and 22 a day are taking the walk off the plank.
Yeah, I've seen that. Actually, I have some of these statistics here. We know that suicide among males is 4 times more likely among males than females, and represents about 79% of all suicides, and that's the CDC. We know that divorced men are nearly 9.7 times more likely to kill themselves than comparable divorced women. We've got, let's see here, National Alliance on Mental Health, nearly 20% of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans report symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or major depression, and the rates of divorce for veterans with PTSD are 2 times greater than for veterans without PTSD. That's the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America website. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is saying that male veterans with PTSD are more likely to report marital or relationship problems. Yep. And so that's some pretty heavy stuff. And
when you watch that one video I made, Purple Heart's Final Beat, and I state that 70% of these guys come back to a divorce. It's fairly accurate. Those numbers are fairly accurate, because since 2007, I've communicated, you know, either through email, phone, or text messages, or what have you. Some of them in person. You know, 35, 36, I don't even know, it's over 3,500 people, service members, and it's this 90% of these combat veterans. I mean, I'm not talking about guys who sit behind a wire and work a computer. Like the guys who go outside the wire day in and day out and clear roads and do patrols and do the actual enforcement of of our foreign policy. These guys are coming home, and they're like 90% of them are divorced within 5 years. So what you're telling me, in odds, I relay in percentage points in the beginning of the video.
Yeah. And one of the biggest demographics, at least according to the statistics, is that the largest number of men that are committing suicide are between the ages, I think, of 40 and somewhere around 60.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's a middle age kind of thing going on. And there's also a high suicide rate for middle-aged females too. I really can't speak to that with any accuracy, other than I was very close to being one of those statistics at one point.
Yeah.
So I mean, when your mind gets in that place, it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I understand that it can be really difficult for these guys coming back with PTSD, and they say that a lot of this really is involved with the mental health of these servicemen and women coming home.
Well, one of the things too, I was reading a study not too long ago, maybe a month or two ago, that found that an extraordinary percentage of men who were homeless and sleeping rough, when they actually pulled them in randomly and put them through an MRI or a CAT scan, found that they were brain injured. And so, I mean, like, you would probably be able to think that or extrapolate that veterans who have a high propensity for having undergone head injuries and brain injuries, my father-in-law being one of them, and that one of the first people apparently dropped in Vietnam out of a plane, has he has early onset Alzheimer's, dementia, complicated by organic brain injuries and chemical exposures, right? So that people, men who have served in the military, are going to be a higher percentage of people who have head injuries. And if head injuries and brain injuries are a risk factor for homelessness, regardless of PTSD, regardless of all of the aspects of reintegrating into normal society and all of those things, all of those difficulties that a lot of soldiers who've been deployed find themselves dealing with, right? But just the simple fact of you are at higher risk of having a brain injury, and therefore now you are at higher risk of being homeless, and not just homeless, but homeless and sleeping rough, right? Mm-hmm. One would expect that maybe somebody might possibly think this is something to pay attention to, and that there might be some political will to help these men.
Well, yeah, I mean, I looked at some of the stats too, and 40%. I mean, is it 70 to 90% of the homeless are men, and of the men that are homeless, up to 40% of them at one point or another served in the military.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a couple stats from that. It said something like 12%, but this is of the people that they're still keeping up with 5 years later, which is not as many. But it says 12% of the homeless adult population are veterans. 20% of the male homeless population are veterans. 50% of which have mental health issues, serious mental health problems.
Well, one of the issues with a lot of homeless data is that it really doesn't look at people who are sleeping rough. It looks at people who are homeless and are receiving services from a shelter. It looks at people who are willing or able to access those services. The ones who are sleeping on heating vents or in cardboard boxes, they don't generally get counted. And because those numbers are unreliable, they're often not included. Even though the researchers know that they're predominantly male, they cannot include them because those numbers themselves are unreliable because of just the very nature of what it is, right?
Correct.
So
there's also sample size. Go on.
I was made homeless by the system, but I was fortunate that I had some friends that were looking out for me and put me where I needed to be. Otherwise, it could have went quite poorly for me.
Well, I think women have a whole host of options that aren't necessarily there for men.
Correct.
I know that if
they have a safety net and men do not.
Well, I mean, not just a government safety net. I know that if I ever leaned on, any of the people at work, probably anybody at work, and said, I really need a place to stay for 2 weeks, right? I would have a place to stay for 2 weeks, even if it inconvenienced them, even if they didn't want me there, whatever, they would feel sorry for me. But more importantly, they would not perceive me as a potential danger in their home, right? And I think that a man asking the same thing of just a coworker or an acquaintance, right? Can I sleep on your couch for 2 weeks, right? Is going to be viewed in a completely different way. They're going to be viewed as, why aren't you capable of looking after yourself, number one, which is not an expectation that we put on women to the same degree. They're going to be looked at as, are you a threat to my children or my wife, right? They're going to be looked at, as, are you looking to steal my TV the moment I go to work in the morning, the first night you stay there, right? They're going to be looked at in a completely, there's a veil of suspicion that always accompanies a man asking for help. Like, what's his angle? What's he looking for? Is he going to defraud me? Is he going to scam me? Is he going to rob me? Is he going to do something, right, that we don't necessarily put on women? And so because of that, women have access, even in very, very superficial ways, to assistance from people who might as well be complete strangers. They're just, oh, I've been working with her for 2 weeks and she seems fine. Sure, I'll let her sleep on my couch.
Yeah.
So
and also you can compound that when they find out that the man's a veteran, because there's an additional, I would say, stereotype that he's just a crazy. He's crazy.
Crazy shell shock guy is going to start opening up with a machine gun when he has a bad dream. Yeah.
Yeah. There's an empathy gap there. I think they people have a hard time, I think, relating because they don't understand veterans or the veteran lifestyle, and I think that they find themselves often alienated. So I guess it's harder for them to perceive them as victims.
Well, you picture a soldier, right? A soldier who's in body armor and carrying an AK-47 or whatever it is. I don't know, Terrence, but whatever it is that you guys carry. It's really hard to picture that guy if he's not missing limbs, if he's not, his bowels aren't spilling out of him. It's really hard to picture him as a victim. He's a powerful icon. He's an icon of masculine power and strength, right?
Well, and there's all kinds of assumptions that people are going to make there, too, especially people who do not know anything about the military as far as what the military does for veterans or does not do for veterans after they're out. And so there's going to be all this idea that there's help available, that these guys are taken care of, and that they've got some kind of a safety net or a provision for them. And a level of capability of handling, just any situation they get into. And people don't realize that isn't there. It's not accessible.
Well, it's never been there.
And it's not,
it's never,
even the systems that are there aren't there. Like the VA has been letting them down in mass.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, but look at the poem. It was written by Rudyard Kipling, 100 years ago or 80 years ago, Tommy Atkins, right? About how soldiers, during times when there is no war, if you are a Tommy Atkins, if you are a soldier, right? You're not welcome to drink here. You're not welcome to spend time here. You're not welcome in polite company. Go. Out the door you go, right? And then the moment war is declared, you're everybody's best friend, right?
It's not
and everybody wants to buy you a drink because you're a hero, and then the war is over and get the fuck out.
Yeah, correct.
You know, this is not a new thing. It's absolutely age old. It's something that, you know, we need. When we need them, we're nice to them, and when we don't, you know, get the fuck out. And it's a really, really horrible, I think, indictment of humanity as a whole, that this has been going on so long that I could know a Rudyard Kipling poem describing it.
Yeah, I think I've read that one before.
Yeah, there's new legislation that they're trying to pass through the House that would reform the way in which the VA handles mental health. It's supposed to, I think, expand facilities and make them more accessible. What do you think? What do you think about that? Do you think that would be profoundly helpful if it is passed?
Well, I mean, I'm not familiar with that particular piece of legislation, and the VA is, you know, operating on a shoestring budget already. So unless they're willing to come off money to fund and assist, they're just kind of pouring more people on the plate. I mean, you know, looking at it, you know, the VA of today and the VA of Vietnam and the VA of World War II are astronomically different. And I'm going to defend the VA a little bit here. Like in 1940, if you needed treatment from the VA, you were going to get 1930 medicine. You weren't going to get 1945 treatment at the VA at World War II.
No.
Vietnam, you know, 68 to 72, you needed treatment at the VA. You were getting 1955 treatment. In the VA of today, you need 2014 treatment. You will get 2014 treatment. You might have to wait for it, but you will get it.
I really hope that's the case. I had early on, after I went on YouTube, I received an email from a Vietnam veteran who spent time in a VA, and he said that the doctors weren't so bad. The doctors were overworked, and they were sort of, I think he sort of felt like that they were emotionally detached out of necessity, right? Mm-hmm. But the nurses, a lot of the nurses, he would overhear them talking to each other about what wimps these guys were, you know, how they should just suck it up, how I can't believe that he's like complaining about this, that, or the other. And a lot of the women, he was just like, I'm listening to these women, these nurses talking about their patients. And he was just absolutely appalled at the level of, like, the level of scorn that these women heaped on men who had been through, like, some really fucking horrible shit, right? And they're like, oh, well, you know, but now he's just a problem, and, you know, and I have to deal with him, and it's a problem, and I wish he'd just stop being such a wuss. And I was like, really? Really? Did they actually do that? And he was like, oh, yeah. Oh, like constantly. It was a constant conversation between the nurses at the VA hospital.
Well, you know, I've actually spent some time in the VA hospital, and yeah, I can't say I saw that, but it might vary from place to place.
Well, this was just early after Vietnam,
but
so
things
may have changed.
This is going to blow your mind when I tell you this, right? When you compare the death rates of the veterans from World War II, and you hold them up against the veterans of Vietnam, the veterans of Vietnam die a lot faster. It's not uncommon to say that if you were served in Vietnam, you will probably not go beyond 68 years old. Whereas a lot of the soldiers in World War II, a lot of them made it to 70, 80, and some of them even older than that. Some of them are still here today, and God bless them. But there are things that we are exposed to that we come in contact with, even to this day, that are very hazardous for us down the road. Maybe it's lithium batteries or whatever they're injecting us with.
Mefloquine.
Who knows what's going to happen. I mean, I myself am not really planning on, seeing anything beyond 65. And, I'm cool with that. And I've known that from the beginning. And I'm willing, and I was more than willing to put those years on the table, on the altar of freedom, because those are bad years anyway. So it is what it is.
Well, one of the things that always struck me was that World War One, not so much, but World War Two, absolutely, was seen as a righteous war, right? It was like the role of America and Britain and Canada in World War Two.
It was romanticized, is what
it was. It was absolutely, and of course it was, because there was a genocide going on, and we put a stop to it, right? And so there was absolutely no question that this was something just and righteous that we were entering into, but with Vietnam, it was much more hazy and murky. And during Vietnam, at that very time, you had all of these anti-war activists and peace activists. So it's like that Steve Earle song, "When Johnny Come Lately Comes Marching Home," right? Mm-hmm. Like there's nobody waiting to hail him as a hero at the airport. There's just protesters, right, calling him a monster for taking part in this thing that he'd been drafted into, right, that he didn't even have a choice.
In that particular instance, the second longest walk that you will ever take in your life is when you get off of the plane and there's nobody there for you, and you have to walk to the bus.
Oh, I'm sure.
And the longest walk you ever take is the walk from the hearse to the graveside to put a loved one in the ground.
And I think probably the third longest walk is when you get out of prison and there's nobody there. You're just dumped on the street, and you're handed the $5 you had in your wallet, and there you go, goodbye.
You are absolutely spot on with that one, woman.
Yeah.
Boom, beer you.
Well, thank you. I look forward to a beer bought by you next time we're in the same room. But it really is. It's just basically a you were part of this thing. You're part of this thing, and everybody had your back, and there was this whole narrative and fiction built around the fact that we're all brothers and all of this stuff and all of this camaraderie. And now goodbye. See you later. Right? You're on your own. And what you sold of yourself to be part of that, I don't know if you ever get that back, or whether you ever reconcile the fact that you did, or the things that you had to do when you're walking to the bus by yourself.
Yeah. It is. It's crazy. I can't really answer that question. I mean, man, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important that these guys who are coming home, that they have these support systems in place, because I remember we were talking on the phone, and you said that was probably one of the things that we can really do to help this problem of veteran suicide and these mental health issues. And
well, yeah, I mean, like when I came home, I went to the doctor, and they told me that squishy thing between your ears and behind your eyeballs that makes you who you are is broken. And it may heal, it may not heal. And we'll know in 2 years, with whatever you have is what you have. That was very scary.
I'm sure.
Okay, that was terrifying. And then you get the PTSD piled on top of that. And then all of a sudden you're going through this really rancor divorce. You have your ex-wife or your partner who you think had your back, no matter what, just put a knife in it. And then you go to the courts to go through the divorce, and then they just treat you like absolute crap and steal the last shred of hope from you.
Mm.
And then it's just a recipe for disaster. It really is.
Well, I mean, I was talking to Tom Maddie, who is, I did an actual shout-out for him about a year and a half ago for his case, which could have, if it had succeeded, changed legal precedent in Alberta and Canadian courts as far as things like stripping men of passports and things like that, and driver's licenses and other things when they have not paid their child support. But he said when you have a suicide hotline and you have a bunch of trained staff, right, manning this suicide hotline, and somebody calls in and they say, "Oh, I've just lost my home," right? I went bankrupt and I lost my home and now I don't have anywhere to live, right? They will automatically consider that person at risk and refer them to all kinds of services and help, right? If you have somebody who claims, "I've just lost my spouse," right, and and I'm feeling really desolate, they will automatically assume them to be at extreme risk and refer them to all kinds of services. If they say that that their bank account was cleaned out by a spam or like a phishing scam or something like that, I lost all of my money, they will immediately see them as at a high risk of suicide and refer them to all kinds of services. But when a man goes into family court, that happens to him. All those three things happen to him in one day. And nobody seems to see that as him being at severe risk of suicide. Even though if he called into a suicide hotline with any one of them, right?
Yeah, you're right.
I lost my home. I lost my loved one. I lost all my money. Oh, I lost my children, right? Of course, we would automatically assume any one of those things would be just a brutal, horrendous blow. But when a man
happens to a woman,
things,
it'd be absolutely terrible. But
if it happens to a man because some serial killer killed his children, or some random nutbag kidnapped his children, right? Or somebody killed his wife, or somebody stole all of his money, or somebody burned down his house. We see it that way. But when his wife did all of those four things to him in one day in divorce court, suddenly we see it completely differently.
It's not a big deal. Oh, you'll get over it, buddy. Suck it up. I understand. I mean, I used to have that. I had that viewpoint before I went through it, and until it happened to me, and and I got the rude awakening, I did not. I thought it. I fell into the same trap that I was special and the rules don't apply to me, because I found out in short order that no, I'm not, and yes, they do, and it was a rude awakening.
Yeah, Crystal.
Oh
Crystal,
yeah. Sorry, it takes me a minute to unmute.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting dynamic, because it turns into, like, how do we keep men from being abused by the government itself? How do we do that? How does that get set up? Because, I mean, also when soldiers were coming back, I know this was happening, that they were told that they only had a certain amount of time to serve, and then the government said, "Oh no, we're just going to give you more time," even though that wasn't the agreement.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about stop loss?
Yeah. I don't know what it was called. Is that what it was? I can't hear.
When you're kept beyond your ETS date, it's called a stop loss.
Okay.
And that's just the way. It's the nature of the beast. It's part of the contract that it can't happen. It's called needs of the army or needs of the government.
So basically,
there's really nothing. I mean, at its core, when you look at any government that's ever existed, they've done so on the backs of men, because we're expendable. Like, I'll break this down as simply as I can to you. If I round up 1,000 men who are 17 to 22 years old, I can train them to be a cohesive military unit in 90 days or less if need be.
Yep.
Okay, because you can take a man and you can run him 50 miles a day, deny him sleep, deny him food. He can go hungry. He can operate in the freezing cold. I mean, they're amazing. When I was young like that, I was virtually indestructible.
It's like Gunnery Sergeant Highway said, "You can run me, you can beat me, you can kill me, you can starve me, just don't bore me."
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, you are a weapons platform, and it's been that way from the ancient Greeks, who lined men up in rows and put big shields in front of them and spears, to today, where we're putting guys in Humvees and jumping out of airplanes. It's all the same. And there's, for a government to exist, you have to accept the fact that there's a certain amount of expendability. Now, on a counter note, I'm a big proponent, since now in the American military, women are allowed to serve in combat arms. I really think that since that last stopgap was lifted, somebody needs to introduce a change to the draft laws or the mandatory service, where men and women have to register for the draft. Because I really think that women, if they get a taste of the expendability, they'll be a lot more sympathetic down the road.
I think actually the draft should have been introduced when women got suffrage. Maybe it should not have been a military draft, but a draft into factories, a draft into sewing uniforms, a draft into picking litter up off the sides of highways if need be. Because men at the time were not just subject to military conscription, they were subject to civil conscription, like bucket brigades and posses and all kinds of things like that. They could be commandeered by a police officer to help quell a crowd, all of those things, right? So I think women should have, when they got suffrage, should have been subject to some form of reciprocal obligation. Mandatory service to government, even if it was not military, right? Even if it was civilian service where...
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. I'm cool with that.
The National Coalition for Men, I think it is, has because it's mentioned in chat, the National Coalition for Men has a lawsuit on this.
Oh, NCFM definitely files a lot of lawsuits, and they get a lot of results that way.
I can almost guarantee.
It doesn't necessarily get a lot of notoriety and news coverage, but they get results.
James?
Yeah, I can almost guarantee you the size of government would be minuscule if that was the case.
Correct.
Well, if women had to pay...
And I will also say this, that I have absolutely no problem serving with a woman. Okay, I really don't.
I'm sure you don't.
If they can do if they meet the standard, I have zero problem with them. I really could care less.
Oh, my sister is she just recently retired, but she was lieutenant colonel in the Canadian military. She was very high up, one of the top administrators for medical services. She's a doctor in the Canadian military. She would be the one who would write emails to parents wanting information on their military children's medical conditions and all of these things, right? She was just very, very high up there and she said at one point, "I'm so grateful to my parents for teaching me a work ethic that has me be the first one that turns the lights on in the morning and the last one to turn them off before I go home." Right?
That's very commendable.
Like she was always one of those people, and she turned down a whole bunch of promotions because she was just like, yeah, no, I'm not going to be able to have my 4 children and my husband, who's an airline pilot, and be able to juggle all of that with being out of the country for 6 weeks at a time, right? Doing stuff. But her job, the job that she had, it was always the priority. She was never one to say, I'm going to take a promotion just for the promotion and then half-ass it. It was always a judgment of, can I actually do the position justice? No, I'll stay where I am. And that, I think, is really admirable, whether you're a man or a woman, to say...
Sure, yeah, I have no argument with that.
Yeah, that really might help to bridge that sort of empathy gap that exists in society for veterans. If we really expanded it to women, the draft, or the possibility that you might be drafted.
Yeah, I really think that they should. I mean,
because there really is almost none. I mean, there are specific states in which they can limit your ability to vote and other services based upon whether or not you register for the draft.
Well, I know as a man, you're not going to get a federal job if you don't register for the draft when you're 18.
Can't get
you don't get student loans, you don't get Pell Grants, you can't work.
I had to register for the draft even though I enlisted in the Army at 17.
You know what's really hilarious is Dean Esme of A Voice for Men, he was telling me, it's not a mandatory requirement to register for selective service. I never registered for selective service, and I've voted in every municipal and state and federal election since I was like 18, right? And I was like, are you sure? And he went and checked, and he found out that he'd been registered without his knowledge at age 18. He'd been registered probably when he either applied for a driver's license or applied for registration to vote.
Jeez.
They get you with your voter's registration. That's
wow.
Yeah. No! Like nowadays, it's very. The only reason why they have the posters and all of those is because illegal immigrants who may or immigrants who may want citizenship, if they don't register by age 26, if they're male, then they lose access to all kinds of stuff, right?
I believe there was somebody trying to talk. Let him speak.
But what it is that if you are a citizen already and you have had any interaction with government, you're already registered.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Oh yeah. What do you think that we can all do to really help this problem, to really create these support systems, Terrence?
Well, I don't know. It's a really tricky subject. I mean, I know that on the military side that they're doing everything they can with. I mean, they really are making a superhuman effort to, correct this issue of the soldier suicide. In regards to veteran homelessness and the veteran suicide, I mean, it's basically a symbol of a sick society. Okay, we need to try to fix things at the base, and I really can't give you an exact answer. I think this problem needs to be studied by some of those 30-pound brain dudes that are way above me in pay grade to make more informed decisions than me. I mean, the reason, me personally, with what I do, is I want the people behind me, since I've already lost my children, they're gone to me. But the men behind me, and any good soldier will always neutralize the threats before him to allow those behind him to carry on, even if it's at his own expense. Okay. So I fight this fight, and I do what I do. I laugh at it, I joke, I made a couple serious videos, because I want there to be a reasonable chance for the dudes behind me to get 50% custody of their kids. Okay. When you do the math, right, and I'll pull up my calculator right now, because I'm a math guy. 18 years times 365 days equals 6,570 days. All right? So if you see those kids 4 days a month, And 2 or 3 weeks in the year, we'll say 12 times 4 equals 48. Okay, and then we'll add 21 to that. So you see your kids 69 days out of the year times 18. We are now at 1,242 days. Okay, if you split that 3,600 in half, and you subtract that, you're missing out on roughly 2,000 hey daddies, 2,000 good nights, 2,000 opportunities to express love, 2,000 opportunities to guide your children and mold their minds and build them into, healthy adults down the road. That's a whole lot of intangibles that was just stolen from you that can never be refunded. And I want to try to make sure that the guys behind me, they get that 2,000 days, the 2,000 days that were stolen from me.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm trying not to cry.
Me too.
Yeah. I'm a little misty. But no, it really is true. There are so many, there's so many fathers that are really missing out on that time with their children that they would normally have had if there were those shared parenting laws. Right now, shared parenting is seen as, I guess a weekend, I think every other week. Yeah. And that's bullshit.
Shared parenting is maternal custody with a new label slapped on it.
What did T.J. Sotomayor say? He actually addressed a crowd at Washington, D.C. on Father's Day. And normally he's quite strident and quite un-PC and very, 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 he can get people's backs up. But this performance that he gave at in front of a crowd at the Capitol building on Father's Day was amazing. And one of the things that he said was, the last time I heard the words visitation, I was sitting on one side of a glass window. Right? That correct. Visitation is what you is what you describe seeing somebody who's in prison, not seeing your father on a weekend. How is it that we call it that?
I understand. And here's another unknown fact. What is the largest hangover day for men in the military?
It'd be the day after Father's Day?
Bingo.
Yeah, no, you know what's really insane is the day where there are the most long-distance phone calls made of the year, not Christmas, not Easter, not Valentine's Day, Mother's Day. Okay? Uh-huh. The day that the most collect phone calls are placed every year, Father's Day.
Wow.
And there is something like 11 times as much money spent on Mother's Day than on Father's Day.
Yeah, I believe that.
I think it's really telling, though. I was looking at the statistics, and one of the consistent things that showed up when they compared single servicemen to divorced servicemen and widowers is that the widowers were almost were very comparable to those who had been divorced. It's almost like somebody died.
Of course, because a part of your life died. You lost a part of your life.
And it's very telling overall, I think.
One of the interesting things I have found is that Mother's Day being such a huge holiday, Father's Day being the day that the most collect phone calls are made. Now, what does that tell you about how you feel about your parents? You feel like you have to do something to appreciate your mother. You feel like you can call your father collect on Father's Day and he'll still love you.
Yeah.
That's
maybe a lot of these fathers are making the collect calls because they don't have any money to see their kids.
Maybe they are.
Could be.
Because I mathematically dissect that one too. I mean,
well,
you
look at it. You know, they're calling. I don't know whether most women would accept a collect call from their ex on Father's Day and pay for it.
You're probably right. They wouldn't.
You know,
well, and if they're calling from Mom's house, she probably is going, no, you can't call him on my bill. You have to call collect.
Yeah, it could be too. All I know is I just think that it should be joint physical custody from the very beginning as they first default, and then you go from there.
Obviously,
very much.
Absolutely.
And I'm so tired of I can't get anyone to give me an exact definition of best interest of the child, because we have prisons full of best interest of the child.
Yeah, there is no exact definition. It tends to boil down to whatever the mother feels is appropriate. But as far as, like, because we just had a bill voted down in Canada in the Parliament, and I asked Senator Cools when I was in Detroit, I asked her why the bill was voted down, and she said something along the lines of course, for all the normal reasons, right? But, and one of the people who voted it down was interviewed, and all he talked about was men's responsibility, right, to their children, not their rights to their children. But one of the things that she said, and it's sort of a mixed thing, a double-edged sword, a mixed blessing, whatever you want to call it, right? She said to me that it was a bad bill. And the reason she said it was a bad bill was because there was a clause in the bill that determined that if there was any allegation of child abuse or child neglect or sexual abuse alleged, right, that the father would lose all rights to custody. And it's there. Of course it's there to say, okay, so it's not written in stone, and if a man is abusive, and I can understand, if a man is abusive, he loses all rights to custody. But because of that clause, she said it was a bad bill because that particular clause could be abused by anybody deciding to level an accusation. It's basically...
Well, notice they presume that abusers are fathers.
Of course, but
exactly. So statistics from, I think it's the Justice Department in the United States, I might have the wrong department, but statistics from the United States show that the majority of child abusers here are women.
Oh, here too. But I mean, it's just like people who say that we should get rid of no-fault divorce and reintroduce fault divorce. And I said, well, if you think that allegations of child and spousal abuse that are falsely levied, are high now, right? Wait until a woman has to make one in order to get out of a marriage, right? Or you can only get an abortion if in cases of rape. Well, if you think false allegations of rape are high now, just wait until a woman needs to make one in order to get an abortion, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this type of clause it has no business being in the law, just like access to abortion has no an allegation of rape or a justification based on rape has no business being in the law, just because a child, if you believe that a fetus is a child with a right to life, then that child has no lesser right to life because they were the product of a rape than if they were not, right? And introducing that kind of condition just opens the door to women making allegations when they are not true in order to access a service that they want, right?
Correct. Yeah,
so,
whenever you talk about the abortion thing, you always get into very, very crazy stuff. So we should probably guide away from that.
Yeah, I would agree, because a lot of people have
that's a nuclear option right there.
Different opinions on it. I mean, I think if anybody wants our individual opinions on that, they can go to our blogs or individual
Me, I see all sides of the issue, right? So,
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people that sees any particular side arguing in bad faith. I think that they're all basically arguing in good faith.
Well, I mean, I personally see us all as a bunch of evil, hairless monkeys who rape and murder each other at will, but that's just me, though.
How hairless are we? Okay, really? Because
you got a hair on your head and you got hair in your downstairs mix-up.
Okay, well, my boyfriend has less hair on his head and more hair on his back. I think it's actually migrating.
It does migrate.
Awesome.
There's like a land bridge across the back of his neck, right, or an ice bridge, and it's going down, right? But it's okay.
And now we're moving into the silly place because I think things got really serious.
No stash.
I love him anyway. He's got the shoulder stash.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Wow.
But.
Well, I mean, but back on topic. In regards to support systems and things that we can do, I mean, men just don't have that anymore because the family unit has been destroyed.
Well, men had family, right? Like I think I mentioned in the comments of the Going Mental that you were just on, just like an hour or two ago, with Paul and Dr. T. I said that men's interests have always been considered to be synonymous with family interests or community interests.
Correct.
Right? And they aren't allowed to have interests of their own. And so if you can frame a man having interests of his own, like I want to see my children, as being detrimental to anybody else's interests, a woman's interests, community interests, anybody's interests, then you don't have to consider them because men don't have interests in their own right. Their interests are considered to be subsumed under the umbrella of the interests. This is why we draft men, right? And not women, is because and if a man dodges the draft, we consider him not a real man. His social identity as a man is destroyed because he declared that his interests diverged from community interests.
You know what? I would have to agree with you on that.
So, I mean, like, you just have this thing where it's a really incredibly difficult thing. And then on top of that, to get men to actually get together and advocate for their interests as men
is hard.
Within a group, not outside of the group, not as men of America advocating their interests against France or Iraq or the UK or whatever, or not as men of the Episcopalian Church advocating their interests against like the Islamic people or the Buddhists or the whoever, right? But as men within their own community, right? In order to actually get them to do that and form a cohesive unit, that's extremely difficult because everybody is pointing them
to do it.
Everyone's pointing them in the direction of, well, your interests are the interests of the group, right? So yeah, and I really hope you keep at it forever and ever, even if it's only to make me smile every week or two.
Yeah, my final question on the list of questions that I had, which was rather shorter than I expected, but was what can we do to help you?
Well,
what can the people listening do to help out your cause?
Well, to be honest with you, share the videos. All right. I have like 50 now, and I go over, and some of them I make fun of, oddities and quirks that go on, like observations. But some of them, I'm really trying to convey life lessons in a funny, comedic way. And if we can get these in front of the younger men out there, or the younger women, or whoever you think needs to see them, you can it's so easy. Just go to YouTube, you copy the link to the video, and drop it on their homepage on Facebook. and there you go.
Yeah, I actually have my YouTube channel. Dean Esme helped me do this. He could help you do this, Terrence, if you want. But I have a Twitter account that I don't almost ever go to, but I'm tweeting all the time because every time I make a blog post on my Blogger blog, every time I post a video, every time I make a comment on anybody's video, anytime I like a video or favorite a video, it gets tweeted automatically.
Well, that's awesome. I got to figure out how to do that. Well, my producer will have to figure out how to do that.
Or you could ask Dean. Dean Esme would be able to help you out with that. He set it all up for me, and this is one of. And I used to never, because I was never one for voting up or down in any situation. But now that I have that, when I see a video that I really like one of yours, or any particular video that I think other people should see, I upvote it on YouTube, and then it gets tweeted. It goes into my YouTube feed, and then it gets tweeted as well, and it goes out to a whole bunch of people. And that's sort of, I make a point of doing that because it's really important that these things get out there to people.
And there's actually some of them I made out there, like Fun with Numbers 1 and 2 and Rules of the Game. I made those videos to be sent to the radical feminists. I really did.
Oh.
Because you can send it to them. Some of them, if you have like an ex-boyfriend, you can send them, life when you're stupid, because they keep making the same mistakes. I mean, I really, try to touch on a lot of the life lessons and a lot of things that are going on. Like Fun with Numbers 2. Well, it's basically, I mathematically dissect a feminist's life from beginning to end. 82 years.
I think I saw that one.
Yeah, I go through the primary and alternate, or the primary and secondary fertility phase, the third fertility phase, which is medically assisted.
Yep, I saw that one.
Yeah, I go through the whole thing. And then, the payoff for these radical feminists is they wind up OPP, old, poor, and powerless.
Well, I would, yeah. Well, here's the thing, though, is that they end up that way, but I wish they were always that way, but they aren't. That's the really horrible thing. Hillary Clinton is essentially, at this point, she should be consigned to a life of petting her cats, her 7 or 8 cats, and wishing that her uterus had been fruitful. Like as far as I'm concerned, but that's not how it worked, right? So. Well,
no, but the jury's still out on that, so we never know. But
her uterus has been fruitful, hasn't it?
Well.
Yeah, she had Chelsea Clinton.
There you go.
But that was just one kid, one child.
She's debatable. She's no Genghis Khan, 1,000 children, and 1 billion descendants.
I think he threw his back out doing that, to be honest with you. But yeah, upcoming, like this year, this week I have, the newest video is called Pimp Tart and Weistitute. And I basically going to have 12 or 15, maybe more videos on this if it's popular, where I mathematically dissect the divorce of somebody rich and famous.
Ooh. Actually, that would be really interesting.
Well,
I'd love you to do Dave Foley if you could.
Well, email to me on the site, and then I'll look into it and Google his numbers. But like right now, I'm doing. I did Mike Tyson and Robin Gibbons. He was, married for a year.
Yeah.
And then, I estimate how many times he tapped the slot C, and then how much money he spent during the whole thing, and then I just divide the numbers, and I figure out how much he spent each time he went to the downstairs mix-up and went into the Bermuda Triangle.
Well, honestly, look at it this way, right? Like when a woman on Facebook, when she gets engaged, what does she do? She almost never posts a profile pic of her and her fiancé. What does she post? her $15,000 engagement ring.
The ring, yeah.
Right? The ring, the $15,000 ring that declares, I am granting you exclusive access to my vagina until death do us part, or I decide I want a divorce. Okay?
Correct. Yeah.
And then we wonder why women freak out so bad when they get raped. Like $15,000 is grand larceny.
Yeah, I mean, with
Like
my ex,
if they see their sexuality as a commodity to be sold, of course they're going to flip right out when it's stolen.
Yeah, you are correct. And I don't. All I know is, I'm the only one on the planet that's doing what I'm doing. I have not seen any work that models mine. I'm trying to clean up my stand-up game and actually talk some of the stuff on stage and tone it down a little bit, because I don't want to have half the audience kill me when I walk out in the parking lot.
Oh, whatever.
Oh,
you know what?
You
You can either tone it down or tone it up.
Your presentation at the conference was very powerful. It really was amazing to be in that room and listening. And the journalists that covered it, I guess they must have been at a different presentation. They were so full of shit.
Well, with
I know. I heard about that PowerPoint thing. That's hilarious.
With me, I was sitting on the couch in the foyer with Aaron Pizzi, and I was trying to have a nap, and you were on, and I could not fall asleep, even though I'd only had 3 hours of sleep before my own presentation. I could not fall asleep because I was listening to your presentation. So,
well, thank you, because I goofed it up quite badly.
I was crying. I got to be honest. I walked in the middle while you were describing
how
your suicide plan, and
how it changed your strategy or whatever. It changed your.
Well, first of all, like like 4 days before my punch out date, this guy that I knew so closely did this to himself, and I'm not going to tell you why or what happened, because that's his particular reasons. But all I know is I ran his funeral. I volunteered for it because if it's I served with the guy, I should be the guy running his funeral.
Yeah.
So, we went through that whole deal, that was terrible. I mean, the whole thing was just, it was like I was fated to see that up close and personal kind of pain.
Yeah.
It was like when a dog pees on the rug and you stick his face in it. It's exactly, I mean, it was a lesson taught to me by the universe in a very upfront, harsh manner, and I listened.
It's actually, it was just, it was absolutely just when you said that you had to deal with that, and it changed your course of action.
Yeah.
That was just a moment where your stomach just knots up listening to that, because that's the one thing, that's the one. It was just happenstance. It was fortuitous. It was coincidence. It was something that just happened that changed your course of action.
Of the second-class citizen videos, that one is the most powerful, because it was meant to mirror a real-life event.
Mm-hmm.
It never did.
Yeah, no, I saw that actually, I think it was about 2 years ago that I saw that video, Purple Heart's Final Beat. And it just absolutely, it just hit me right. It's like being hit with a medicine ball right in the chest, right?
Yeah, and I have no idea why that one hasn't even hit the mainstream media.
It hasn't, because nobody wants to see it. People don't want to see it. It's uncomfortable.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. It really is. I was emotionally destroyed. I was like, oh gosh, why aren't more people seeing this? And then I remember seeing that article. She was like, it was a PowerPoint slide, and I was just so... I'm like, we gotta get this guy on the show.
Yeah.
You know,
What she wrote was so stupid.
Personally, I think we had to get him on the show because he took pity on me when everybody left for lunch that day and people were stopping me and wanting to talk to me, and when I looked up, everybody was gone and I was destined to go to lunch by myself. And the only person there who could go to lunch with me was Terrence Popp, and he said, "Let's go."
Aw.
All good.
We had a beautiful bacon and eggs hangover lunch. It was beautiful.
That sounds like a good lunch.
That sounds magical.
Awesome.
By the way, Terrence.
Yeah.
As per our conversation during that lunch, you are lucky to have me. You are lucky to have a woman like me.
Sweet.
You wouldn't even be able to get someone as good as me. Don't even think it, loser. You are lucky to have me.
Oh my F.
Oh my gosh, Karen, what's wrong?
What? It's the way that women abuse their men, and I described it to him, and he said, "Remind me of it at some point, so that I can incorporate it into things."
You are lucky to have me. That's right.
You are lucky to have me.
The indirect. Wow, it's like shaming and then belittling at the same time.
And exactly, and boosting yourself.
Correct.
Right? Saying, I have options and you don't. It's such a common tactic with women. You're lucky to have me.
That's so abusive. Oh, God.
Yeah.
I'm writing that one down. So I don't
Wow.
My husband.
Well, that's why you reminded me to remind you, is because you didn't write it down at the lunch. So I just figured I'd better remind you. So.
Well, any other thoughts, guys? We can always.
You could send the Purple Hearts video to some people in the media and see what they'll do with it.
Actually, yeah, we could absolutely do that.
I think we ought to start a campaign. See if we
should
get people to tweet it to him as possible.
Yeah, we should actually try and shove it onto all of our media. Just everything. Like if we hand it to Dean Esme, he'll just like start tweeting, and then everybody will start tweeting.
I showed it to my parents.
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Or maybe a year and a half ago. So, I mean, like I show it to people, just because it's one of those things that, yeah.
What did they think about it?
You know, most people don't want to have a conversation afterwards. I think that's one of the things. It's like it really is like a medicine ball to the chest. That they don't want to address it because they know what it is.
Yeah,
right? They don't want to acknowledge it because they know what it is.
You should put that video link, the link to that video in every one of your lawmakers' email inboxes.
Yes, that was what I was going to suggest. All of the
this is what your laws have done.
State and federal. Because it's a combination of both that has done it.
And with that bill traveling through the House, it needs all the help it can get.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually I talked with the guy from England, and I'm actually going to try to make a few videos that are actually England specific. Because, you know, as bad as we have it here in America and Canada, they got it equally as bad, if not worse, over there in England, from what I've been told.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
which guy from England can you say? Is someone we know?
Yeah, he was at the conference. He spoke at the conference.
Ah,
he has his own political party. I'm bad with names.
Oh, Mike
Buchanan.
Yeah, that guy's a great dude.
Oh no, he's really sweet. He's nice. I so many people call him a misogynist, and I'm just like, what?
A misogynist? I don't know how to massage anybody. I just tell it how it is. You know?
Yeah. Well, me too. I get called a misogynist and a bio-truther. Whatever.
Yeah, I love that
means.
bio-truther. Like, if they use the word
What is a
bio-truth-
bio-truther?
A bio-truther. Anybody who actually says that men and women are different as a function of biology, like Tom Golden during his speech in Detroit, he said that about 18% of women grieve or deal with loss in the way that men typically do, and 18% of men deal with loss in the way that women typically do, right? And, but on the whole, men and women deal with loss and grief in different ways, right? And that this has a lot to do with the sort of the flood of either estrogen or testosterone in the womb between about 6 weeks gestation to 18 weeks gestation, right? And he even said, look at your fingers and your finger lengths, right?
Yeah.
And if your ring finger is longer than your index finger, you have a more masculine style of thinking and behaving, right? And my ring fingers are longer than my index fingers. Allison is very unusual in that one of her ring fingers is longer than her index finger and the other is not. But that the flood, the surge of testosterone causes your ring finger to grow longer in the womb. When it occurs at a certain point, that masculinizes your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So apparently I have a masculinized brain, and so I don't behave like a typical woman. But the moment that you say something like that most women behave like women biologically, most men behave like men biologically, even though there are some exceptions, you are called a bio-truther, and you are basically accused of claiming that stereotyping and discrimination are okay because of these bio-truths and blah, 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 blah. And it's just...
That's one I've never heard before, to be honest.
I've never heard it before either, but there are biological truths. What are they saying? That science isn't real?
Yeah, I know. That's what they're saying, that evolution stopped at the neck. It went up from the toes all the way up, and then it stopped at the neck, right? That's where it stopped, and then everything above the neck is tabula rasa, right? Gender is a social construct. Personality is just imposed on people by the culture,
Unless
which
you're
somehow sprang out of nothing.
Yeah.
That's just it. Feminists will call you a bio-truther for pointing out when there is a biological explanation for a condition or a behavior or anything about humanity that contradicts, their desire to call something a social construct. So if they want to say that the explanation for something is that it's socially conditioned, and you can find a biological cause for it, you're a bio-truther.
Oh,
if they'll turn around and use biology
of course
to their advantage in their arguments. Women are smaller and weaker, therefore we need to be protected by the Violence Against Women Act.
Men have a rape switch and all of that stuff, but
when it comes to babies, so women should have all the reproductive rights. That's another one.
Well, maybe that's why. Maybe it's our differences that are why the rate of male suicide is so high in comparison to that of female suicide.
I don't think so, because up until something like 1910, the rates were about equal.
I think the rate of male suicide higher in part comes from the fact that society spends a man's entire life telling him he's not valuable. I think what Terrence experienced with his friend's suicide and seeing the family's pain afterwards, that how that brought him around, that right there is a huge indicator of what men face and what is the one of the biggest problems behind the fact that men more often commit suicide than women. And that is, it takes seeing the response of the people who have lost another man that you know before a man realizes how valuable he is.
One of the really interesting things that I have been trying to reconcile is that male and female suicide rates were about equal, around the turn of the last century, right? But as far as reports of happiness and contentment and well-being and all of that stuff, right? Women, up until the 70s, women always reported higher levels of happiness and well-being and whatever, right? The early 70s. And then it started to take a nosedive. Isn't that interesting? Right around the height of the second wave feminism, women's happiness took a nosedive, right? Men's continued to go down, but not relative to women. It went down at a much slower rate. And at some point, I think in the 90s, they intersected, and now men report higher levels of happiness, well-being, contentment, all of those things than women do, even though their suicide rates are still sky high compared to women's, right? Part of me is wondering whether maybe it's just women complain more, women are more readily interested in identifying things that make them unhappy, right? Before they get to the point where they're ready to commit suicide, they're able to say, this makes me unhappy and I'm going to complain, or I'm going to say that I'm not happy.
Well, and this isn't going to be popular, but I've got to say it. There are more women than men who go through the motions of committing suicide without the intent to die. The intent is to get attention and draw attention to their unhappiness and manipulate people around them into sympathetically trying to fix whatever those situations are. Well, I've been subjected to one of those attempts.
One of the things that got me is that you always hear, men commit suicide more, but women attempt it more. Women attempt suicide 3 to 4 times more often than women is the typical number that you hear, right? There was somebody who actually did sort of an archaeological investigation of different studies, right, who said he never actually found a single piece of actual data that indicated that. The only piece of data that he found was that for every 4 suicide attempts by men, there were 5 suicide attempts by women, right, which is not significantly higher. Or it wasn't even attempts. It was suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation. Have you ever contemplated suicide in your life? And none of the successful attempts were counted in that number. Right? It was a survey of people who were still alive, who said, yes, I have considered suicide. Yes, I've thought about it. Yes, I planned it. Yes, I attempted it. Yes, the entire gamut, right? 4 men to 5 women versus 3 to 4 men to 1 woman actually doing it.
Yeah.
And none of the completed suicides were counted in that 4 women to 5 men number. Right? So you could still have, if you count an attempted suicide, if you count as an attempted suicide any attempt that failed or was completed, you would still have a larger number of male suicides.
Well, how about introducing some news topics in?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Hannah, do you want to read your article on...
Let me see if it has opened up here. I had closed it. There it is. Okay. Lowe's employees fix vet's wheelchair after it breaks in store. That's the headline. Last week at a Lowe's in Staten Island, New York, 3 employees stepped up to assist a disabled Vietnam veteran whose wheelchair broke as he and his wife were shopping. Gosh, I can't remember how to say this guy's name. Michael Solsona, I believe it's Solsona, lost his legs to a landmine in 1971 and is dependent on the chair for mobility. But Wear and tear had made the one he had unreliable. His request to Department of Veterans Affairs for a new wheelchair had been denied for the last 2 years. Told he was ineligible for a spare, he was planning to make repairs, but when a chair broke in the store, 3 employees rushed in to help. He later wrote about the experience in a letter to his local newspaper. 3 employees, David, Marcus, and Soliman, jumped to my assistance immediately. They placed me in another chair while they went to work. They took the wheelchair apart and replaced the broken parts and told me, "We're going to make this chair like new." I left 45 minutes after closing hours in my wheelchair that was like new. I kept thanking them, and all they could say was, "It was our honor." The actions of these 3 employees at Lowe's showed me there are some who still believe in stepping up to the plate. The letter is accompanied by a photo of Mr. Solsona holding a sign with the word "Thanks." The story was picked up by national news, and BuzzFeed contacted the VA for a comment. Under that spotlight, the department finally got on the case, and Mr. Solsona now has a new wheelchair. A spokesperson responded to the comment request with the following statement: "We were very sorry to hear about the reported circumstances surrounding Mr. Solsona's request for his new wheelchair. We quickly investigated and can report the veteran's new custom wheelchair was delivered to him today, and along with it, his backup will be serviced by the VA as needed. Too many veterans wait too long to receive their care and benefits, and this has never been acceptable. Providing veterans like Mr. Solsona the quality care and benefits they have earned through their service is our most important mission at the Department of Veterans Affairs." The spokesperson is absolutely right. It is a terrible outrage that this is happening, not as the exception, but often as the rule, faced by veterans across the country. It's heartwarming to hear stories of people like the 3 Lowe's employees who stepped forward to fill in where the government let Mr. Solsona down. It's an example other folks can and should follow. We may not all be in a position to directly mitigate the adversity faced by veterans denied care, but we can and should keep the pressure on our civil servants in Washington for effective, meaningful reform.
Well,
That's
yeah.
great. I think it's awesome.
With that being said, I have to check out because I have to go drive home. But I hope you have me again on your radio show. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, absolutely. It's been our pleasure to have you.
All right.
Seriously. And don't forget, you're lucky to have me.
I already wrote it down.
All right, good.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank
you. Be safe.
Yeah.
How many listeners you guys got?
James, you know? James. I think
60 listeners right now.
60?
60.
At the moment.
Yeah, but with YouTube and everything, we get, I think, somewhere. It depends on the episode. But yeah, pretty good.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, if you can put a link to redonkulous.com in there, and share those videos.
Definitely.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Like them.
Well, I know a lot of men like them, but they hide them from their wives.
Yeah. Oh.
I like him. I hide him from my boyfriend.
Yeah.
Not really, but I was just trying to join in. I was just trying to fit in.
I mean,
I'll hide him from my boss.
Oh, Hannah.
All right. Well, my cell phone's gonna die, and I got to make a phone call. So
All
it's been
right.
a pleasure, and I will see you all another time.
At the next conference,
Take
I hope.
care.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. I'll talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.
And that was Terrence Pop from redonkulous.com and secondclasscitizen.org. We got a couple other news stories that we can get through, and let's see here. I've got, this is a great one. Mother of 13 attempts to hire a hitman to kill her husband. Wendy Farley of Branville, Maine, is getting a slap on the wrist after attempting to hire a hitman to kill her husband in 2012. The 48-year-old mother of 13 was arrested after approaching an acquaintance and offering him $3,000 to kill her husband and make it look like a hunting accident. The man she approached worked with law enforcement to obtain a recording of the transaction. The recording resulted in a mistrial earlier this year, leaving the jury unable to decide her fate. But this week, she returned to court and submitted a guilty plea. However, she will only serve 4 months in jail for a crime that normally carries a sentence of 10 years. Her husband has supported her throughout the case and did not wish to press charges. He also testified on her behalf, stating that he still loves her. It's hard to know which of them is crazier, the woman who tries to kill her husband or the man who's crazy enough to take her back. Discuss. I know.
I saw this. I couldn't believe when I saw this. And even at the end, she still isn't saying she's guilty. She's saying that, oh, well, you guys might have some evidence that made me look like I'm guilty, but I'm just innocent. Unbe-fucking-leavable. If that were a man, she'd have been thrown in jail, like, just instantly. It wouldn't have even fucking come to a mistrial. How do you mistrial that?
Well, and if that were a man, the spouse wanting to stay with him would be accused of having battered woman syndrome.
Right. Yeah, or Stockholm syndrome or something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And I do see abuse victims blinding themselves to the characteristics of their abuser that, that they should be figuring out, hey, I need to get out of here.
I actually see...
But not necessarily in the way that they described with battered woman syndrome.
Well, I see men, typically, who've been hit by their partners say, I don't want to report it because I don't want her to get in trouble, and maybe the hitting is not what they would maybe consider as abuse. It may not even be something that they can't, they may feel like they can handle it, they can grab her wrists or whatever and handle it, right? That there are instances where I think that violence between partners doesn't necessarily need to be reported to the police. I absolutely believe that. The violence is not synonymous with abuse, right? Abuse is an ongoing pattern. Violence could even just be one lashing out that never happens again. And one of the interesting findings with abuse that Dr. Don Dutton found, that lots of people found, was that in many cases violence and violent conflict between couples did not escalate over time, but actually de-escalated over time as couples figured out ways to resolve their differences and cope with each other, right? So I don't think that it's always in need of intervention, and I don't think that violence is always synonymous with abuse, but I think that it's actually very funny that any woman who is in the situation that this man was in, if she said, I still love him, right? She would be surrounded by tons of people saying, you're too good for him, he's not good enough for you, he did you wrong, blah, 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 blah. You need to just, look after yourself, take care of yourself, honey, you're the most important thing, blah, 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 blah.
Well,
right?
And they would tell her that her desire to stay with him and her continued
is unhealthy
for him, were a sign of emotional and mental dysfunction, not a functional behavior.
Yeah.
They certainly wouldn't send her home with him.
Well, I mean, even if it was a functional behavior, even because, as I've said, there are cases where these things de-escalate over time. It's just a one-time thing, or it's maybe it's just a big kerfuffle that happens once and never is going to happen, never going to come up again, right? Even in those situations where it's just like a random one-time thing, a woman is going to be told, oh, you need to leave him because he's not ever going to stop until he kills you.
Yeah, in fact, in those situations, that's pretty much the government or the organizations involved escalating the abuse, even if it's not necessarily violence on their part, although I would actually call throwing a guy in jail violence.
They have 13 children! let's even wrap our minds around that for a moment. She's
13
40.
children.
Well, they're good friends, obviously.
I couldn't conceive. I was
Obviously,
like,
they're
what?
good friends.
Did I
I'm
just
like,
hear?
okay, I guess they feel bad for her because maybe she's got like 13 kids and she's given birth like 13 times, but that's still
That's
horseshit.
not a reason to.
As a mother,
I know that's still horseshit.
as a mother of 3 children, if there's 13 children and this is the first time there's been some kind of significant issue, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he wants her back. That's the thing that just baffles me.
Yeah,
He wants to make things okay. He wants to mend their relationship and everything. And he's like, he actually was completely oblivious to the fact that she was unhappy because he thought everything was cool. But she was telling the hunter that she wanted him dead because she was unhappy, and she was saying I think she said later on in court that they had like domestic disputes and crap like that, but they actually found no evidence of that whatsoever, that she was being abused or that the kids were being abused or any of that. None at all. Out of 13 kids, none of them saw anything out of the ordinary.
That actually strikes me as somebody who's just wanting to leave a relationship and have the guaranteed payout, but not have to go through court to get it.
Yeah.
Right? So they're going to collect a life insurance policy rather than child support, right?
Yeah, that is just ridiculous.
That is sick.
She thought it out. She thought it out enough that she wanted it to be to make it look like it was a hunting accident. It was just a mistake. Oh my gosh.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's vicious.
Yeah,
that is vicious.
I worry about this guy. I mean, he's the father of 13 kids. Some of them are probably still, young and everything. And what's going to happen to them if she goes like apeshit again?
Right.
Or if he, heaven forbid, dresses like a moose during hunting season. Sorry,
no.
reference to bad YouTube video.
Oh no.
Dress up like a moose during hunting season.
But we finally got Karen singing on air.
Disturb a nest of wasps for no good reason. You know what I would be
And
worried
you
about
said
is
you
considering the amount of kids that she has, what's to say that she doesn't start taking out insurance policies on them?
Oh god, that's creepy.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, that's really scary.
There have been mothers who've done that, yeah.
Oh my god, what the fuck? What is wrong
How
with
many
people?
kids already have one?
I get notices from the school, right? I get packages at registration every year. I get package from the school saying, you can take out Gerber's life insurance policy on your kid, right?
Yeah.
That'll pay you $15,000 on the death of your child. And I'm just always like, what? What?
And then back in the 70s, they used to call people on the phone. They made the mistake of discussing this with my father. And when I say mistake, he was really, really PO'd that they called him and asked him to take out a life insurance policy on his children. And by the end of it, he had really guilt-tripped the telephone operator.
Okay,
but the idea of this is insane. They sell this to like every parent. When you give birth at a hospital in the United States, the hospital sells your name and your address to all kinds of organizations. So I got the Gerber life insurance thing. I got all kinds of, buy these books for your 6-year-old. My child was an infant, and and all that. But the Gerber life insurance one just set my dad off because it took him right back to that phone conversation with this person giving him the hard sell. Well, you wouldn't want to be in a position where if your child dies, you have to scramble for money to bury your child. My dad finally was like, well, you know what? It would be the last money I'd ever have to spend on him, wouldn't it? And
you know what?
The woman at the other end was just traumatized.
You know what? I look at me and the way I want to be buried. I want to be buried in a fucking cardboard box, right? I don't want to be in a titanium casket where I turn into soup, right? I just want to be buried in a piece of ground in a nice place, or cremated, right? In a cardboard box or a coffee can. Whatever. Okay.
Actually, we should do it. We should do it in Big Lebowski style, and then just like find a cliffside, and then just
just like freaking flip the ashes into some other dude's face. Yeah. You know, but
your final joke,
I was
Karen.
actually for a long time.
I'm going back to college. That's what I'm going to.
I was considering for a long time starting a company called Plain Pine Box, where I would just build caskets out of pine wood where your loved ones would not be turned into soup, right? Because that's what happens when you deprive the environment of oxygen, right? You don't even want to know what your loved one looks like after 5 years underground in a titanium airtight water-sealed casket. Right? It doesn't rot properly. It doesn't mummify. It turns into soup. It turns into, like, freaking something absolutely disgusting and abominable. Right? I thought, I'll just freaking open a company and I will build plain pine boxes to bury people in. Right? And I'll sell them for $100 each. Not $3,500 for this airtight thing. $100 to have a container that's relatively nice and aesthetically pleasing and dignified for your loved one to be buried in, and then they will go ashes to ashes, dust to dust, not a human body to fucking soup.
Yeah. Karen's crematorium.
Sorry.
You kill me, grill him.
Sorry, I got on a rant there, but the whole idea that, like even just the idea that, once your loved one dies, they belong to the funeral home. No, they don't. You can claim the body from the morgue. You can take charge of it. You can decide to bury it where you want.
Aren't there health regulations, though, as to where bodies can be buried?
Not anywhere you want, but where you want.
Okay, got it.
I don't know about Canada, but in the United States, it's a lot more tightly controlled. You wouldn't be able to bury somebody here in a pine box.
You can still claim the body. There is a house in New Orleans where there is a mummified corpse.
It's not called the Rising Sun, is it?
Still dressed in his burial suit, standing up in the corner, right? Because there's no law against it.
That's because he's not in the ground.
Yeah.
If you put him in the ground, there's all kinds of laws that regulate what you can do.
This went really dark very quickly. That wonderful dark kind of humor that we're famous for.
Well, that's what Gerber Baby Foods does. It brings up the dark, freaking horrible aspects of life and death.
This is why I put that.
Allison's going to kill us, you know that? Allison's going to come back from the circus.
She's not going to kill us. She just came from the circus. She'll be happy.
She came back. She's going to come back to the circus. She's like, Rachel, what did you do? You started with a really serious topic, and now you're making death jokes about dead bodies.
Dead babies, really.
Okay. And
we're done now.
James is telling James is telling us.
No more jokes.
Okay.
Do not start the dead baby jokes.
No, we're not gonna. No.
All I gotta say is right now we have a circus in town, Cavalia Odisseo, the horse show, the Lipizzaner stallions, all of that. If I look out my back window, I can see their big tent. It's that close to my house. Yeah. So not quite the circus.
Now, are you sure it's a big tent, or do those pegs just make the tent look big?
It's a really, really, really big tent. It's huge. It's huge. I should take pictures of it. I think I will, and I'll upload them.
Karen, is it over 9,000?
Oh man, it's like over 18,000.
Oh gosh, yeah. But I think James is telling us we gotta start wrapping it up, and So really, I want to thank everybody that was involved with this episode, because I really think this is an important topic for us to cover.
Especially Terrence,
Yeah, especially Terrence. And you can find his work at redonkulous.com and secondclasscitizen.org, I believe. Mm-hmm. And you can download this episode after we're done here, roughly, I guess, in an hour or so, at www.honeybadgerbrigade.com. And thanks for watching. And you can find us, I don't know if we're doing a show this. Anyway, you can find us next week. Same Badger time, same Badger channel. Good night and good luck.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio, radio with bite.